We are now honored to be joined by John Tory, the 65th Mayor of Toronto, who has been an integral part of putting Toronto's tech industry on the world stage. Joining the mayor is serial entrepreneur Michele Romanow, who started 5 companies before her 33rd birthday. All right, so Bat Mitzvah area ladies, you got some work to do. She is also a dragon on CBC's hit show Dragon's Den, and Michele is the co-founder of ClearBank, which provides entrepreneurs the capital to grow. Michele and the mayor are both champions of Move the Dial, and we are so delighted to have them join us in conversation today. Please welcome to the stage the mayor and Michele Romanow.
Well, it is wonderful to be here at the inaugural Move the Dial Summit. We are in a place in history, a moment in time, and with Jody as our fearless leader, who I think is truly a force to celebrate that. Hear, hear. Let's celebrate
one of my
her.
heroes, yeah. Yay, Jody.
And more importantly, you flew back from Web Summit in Lisbon today to be here with us. So thank you so much. Isn't that incredible?
Yeah. Well, they were talking over there too, by the way, about exactly what's being talked about here, which is ways in which we're going to increase the representation of women in tech. And I went there to see how they put that on because we're having a big conference here called Collision next year. And one of the first things Patty Cosgrove, the founder of Web Summit and Collision, told me was that they did this year and every year before to make sure it was a success.
Yeah.
They give the first block of tickets, I think it's 5,000 tickets, there are 70,000 people there, there'll be 30,000 people coming to Collision, to women at a very significant discount to make sure they are there and a big part of this. And so I'm already taking that lesson just to say, well, that's something we're going to have to do with them, exactly the same thing, to make sure women are in big numbers at Collision in Toronto next May.
Totally. It's exciting. We're going to have 30,000 people come here for the Tech Summit. So tell me, Toronto is in a moment, right now. What's happening in the Toronto tech scene? Certainly, it was amazing that we attracted, a worldwide conference with 30,000 people. Like, give me a bigger view of how you think the city is doing.
Well, I think people look at sometimes the things that look most obvious, which is that there are global companies investing here, and then they fail to look underneath that and see that the reason that the global companies are investing here is because of the incredible startup community we have. And the reason we have the incredible startup community, if you look down one layer further, is the pool of talent we have here and the diversity of talent. And if you don't think people in the rest of the world don't know, in fact, they know very little about Toronto. It's actually surprising, and it's one of the reasons you have to be out and sell.
But
they know about diversity, and they know about our way of life. That's right. They know about our way of life here, that we respect each other and that we really care about things. That this is why Jody Kovitz founded Move the Dial here and not in Timbuktu or in, I mean, we were lucky enough she lived here, but because here I think we actually look at these things and say they matter, and people are aware of that around the world. And so what they're less aware of just how big and how substantial our tech ecosystem has become. And it's one of the reasons we need to have the 30,000 people come here, because until you see it and you meet the people, you see the diversity with your own eyes and feel it, then I think, but it's really actually very proud to be from here, because the way of life, which is the one thing you probably can't change that easily, it's good and it's admired.
It takes years, and it's taken years of policy to get us to the point. It's taken all the investments from the university, and we are in kind of a special moment, I think, for the city.
So now they mentioned, and it would be a point of great pride for me if I was introduced as a serial entrepreneur. I worked for one, for Ted Rogers for many years, but
one of the great
well, he was, and one thing I will say to you is he was a guy that just said he never, ever gave up on anything, and it's a piece of advice that I think you've heard. We just heard it from Arlen, and you just got to keep hearing it over and over again, no matter who you are. Don't give up if you've got an idea that you want to put forward. But if you had, if you had a bit of advice that sort of gets inside your head a little bit as to what made you, found 5 companies before you were 33. I thought you were only 31 now, but anyway.
I'm 33. I do age,
John.
Okay.
But if you took that never ever give up and sort of said, well, what's inside your head? I'm sure that's there too. What would it be?
I think the mindset for me is, first of all, I really believe in being scrappy. Like, I think as an entrepreneur, you got to be willing to do whatever it takes to close that deal, find that partner. Early, even in Clearbank, I remember we were at a conference and really wanted to get Uber as our first partner, and like Travis Kalanick is having dinner with Eric Schmidt with 12 other people, and I don't know either of them. And I look at my co-founder Andrew and I go, well, they say you're supposed to do one thing every day that scares you, so I'm gonna go interrupt their dinner right now and pitch my business. And it worked out, but like, successful people do what unsuccessful people weren't willing to do. It was just, my first business was a fishery, had zero glamour to it, and I just kind of kept going. And then the point on failure, I think, is really fascinating, because instead of me thinking about like all the things that I'm working on, I just always think about how do we run 5 experiments at a time and letting the market tell me what's really working. And Clearbank's a great story. This was company number 5 for me. You'd think I'd be a little bit better at this after some experience, but
you're doing all right.
But the first 2 products that we launched weren't quite the right one. And today we found that we're funding e-commerce entrepreneurs. We're funding their ad spend. This year we'll give entrepreneurs more than $120 million, which is crazy. But more importantly, we have funded 8 times more women than industry average, which I think is the cool part.
But can I come back to something you said? Because I think whether it's a man or a woman, but it is just a lesson that people often think, oh, that's just a trite sort of point. Yeah. The notion of walking up to somebody and what did you say? It's something that
do something every day
that you're afraid of. Yeah. Is so important, because I say it with regard to mentoring too. Yeah. If you see somebody you want to mentor you, I would argue that 9 times out of 10, if you go up and ask somebody, they'll say yes.
It's true.
But if you don't ask them, they certainly won't say yes, because they don't know that you want them to mentor them. Yeah. And I just think the whole notion of going up and interrupting that dinner probably was quite fundamental to your, that one moment where you said, I'm just going to have the courage to walk up and interrupt that dinner. Yeah. And these are things that people often don't think about, and it takes a lot sometimes because you're scared to death. When I was first in politics, I was afraid to walk up to a group of strangers and put my hand out and introduce myself, because I figured they'd say, well, and so why am I supposed to care about that? Right. But the fact is, you have to learn to do it. You do. We're sitting here because Jody had the courage to set up something in Toronto called Move the Dial, and to say, I'm going to have a summit meeting like 1 year in, and here we are, all of us together. So yeah.
It's I couldn't agree. There's this mantra around, if you push yourself out of your comfort zone every day, and it's exactly that. It's like pretty amazing that one of the best Canadian politicians is telling me at one point it scared you to come up with a group of people, and now you've spoken in front of hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, you just have to, but just the first time is the hardest one. Yeah. And then after that, you sort of figure, hey, this isn't so bad.
I know. It's like you build that risk-taking muscle, and then it feels better every time. Yeah. So I think the other thing, we're talking a lot about mentors and what that means. I think, I've not only been mentored by great women, but also a lot of great men in my career. Like, what's your advice to the men out there right now?
Well, I would say, I often look at things and sort of say, well, as a matter of principle or as a matter of self-interest? Because you can always appeal to somebody on the basis of either or both of those. Yeah. As a matter of principle, then you should be saying, well, look, we should be treating everybody equally, and we should be encouraging everybody to come and put themselves forward and be in the tech world. And we should be taking the fact, even at Web Summit, they were talking about the fact that today 37% of the people in tech are women, only 37, and only 25, even with 37%, 25 are in leadership positions. Yeah. So men, as a matter of principle, should be stepping up to rectify those numbers. And it's one of the reasons why I, as mayor, said, and I can tell you that it's changed 2 conferences, and it's meant one that I didn't speak at, but I said, I will not speak at a conference where there isn't adequate representation of women on the panels and in the audience. And in 2 cases, when we got the brochure or whatever it was, and we saw it was all sort of men, we said, well, I'm sorry, I can't come. And when they asked why not, we said so, and they changed it. In 1 case, they didn't, and I didn't go. Yeah. And I was saying to Jody, being honest,
look at the power the individual has. Look at the power your choices have.
I want to confess, I was telling you backstage, I want to confess that at Web Summit, I was on a panel 2 days ago in Lisbon, and I realized as I got to this panel, it was all men. Yeah. And I wasn't going to stomp off because I'm there trying to sell Toronto, but at the same time, I should have just said, by the way, I've taken note of the fact, and if this were Toronto, I would have left. Yeah. I never would have showed up. But let's switch away from the matter of principle to the matter of self-interest. Yeah. How can we build the best tech ecosystem in the world, and I'll just confine myself to Toronto and Canada, if we're excluding the talent that comes, or partially excluding the talent that comes from half the population?
100%.
And how how can we miss out on that perspective? Because I've often operated, and look, I haven't been perfect in my own record on this, but we made sure, and I saw it in some of the material up for the conference, we made sure when I was at Rogers that we said every short list for every management position had to include at least one woman. And the fact is people started off going, well, there aren't any, and where are we going to find them, and how's that going to happen? They found them in many cases, not all, they got the job because they were on the list. And so I think that the matter of self-interest says to those men, you want to have don't you want to have the best team possible to win? And all men will say, yes, I do. And so then you say, well, fine then. I mean, if you want to have the best team possible with the most talented people, then you're going to want to make sure you find the best women and make sure that they're represented on your team. And I think men actually, you can appeal to them on one of the two bases. Many will respond to the position of principal. The others will respond to the competitive urge to be the best and to win. And say, well, if you want to have the winning team, then, make sure. And we know the talent's out there. That's not ever been the issue, ever.
No, and what I picked up the most on is how it's the individual choices we can make to influence that can have an enormous impact, right? You probably sent a one-line email that said, I can't participate if we don't have some representation on that panel. And you changed everyone's perspective.
Well, it's like you walking up to interrupt the dinner. You only have to do it the first couple of times, and then word gets out there that there's no point in inviting him. And it's not just me. We sort of said this of some of the senior people from the city. And I just think you're right about that. I mean, I think that if you sort of take that first initial sort of position, or better still, just give the advice of saying if you want the best team possible, but I think it can work. And I think things like this help to make it work too. And the very fact it's being talked about by 70,000 people in Lisbon today, the very same issue that's being discussed here at Move the Dial. That's why I wanted to be in both places, because this is a big discussion. It was interesting because they were talking about climate change and a number of things that don't necessarily sound like a tech conference, but the way we're going to change the world is through the kind of people who have the ideas that are that are represented here, and they have the entrepreneurship to change the world more so than perhaps I do. I mean, I'm more of a person who's going to sort of help to provide leadership, but not necessarily be an entrepreneur. Anyway.
Well, look, we couldn't wish for a better advocate for tech in our city. You have been just so influential in making sure that this movement and Toronto has been put on the map. We are in a totally different place than
we were. I want the smartest people in the world, when they answer the question, where do I want to go and live if I want to leave where I am now or if I want to have opportunity, to say Toronto. The smartest, most accomplished, most ambitious people, as long as they understand our way of life, which I think they do. I think they seek it out, which is a place where no matter what their race, their gender, their skin color, their nationality, their faith, their sexual orientation, they're going to be accepted and embraced and treated as a great member of a team. And I think that's what we're building here. It's not perfect, but I think the people in the rest of the world have kind of figured out there's something a little different going on in Canada. Generally, it's very proud, as you know, to travel and be a Canadian, because we haven't got it perfect, but we're sort of headed in the right direction.
We're headed in the right direction, and I think we're building something pretty incredible. So.
You didn't ask me. I'm just the only thing I'm disappointed. I'm very impressed. You're one of my heroes too, but you haven't got the latest fashion accessory that everybody.
I have not. Tell us about
Why don't you have one? Well,
your latest Christmas
there's
stocking.
Nothing to tell. It's just you need to have something that gets the conversation going.
I was going to go
with nothing wrong with my foot whatsoever.
No. See, I was going to comment on the raccoon socks, which are our true
raccoon socks. You check those out.
Ode to Toronto.
Raccoon socks. And they have Toronto on them somewhere. Everybody should have a pair of these too. Raccoon socks.
The way we treat our raccoons in the city is the ultimate ode to diversity and inclusion.
You were also supposed to ask me about my favorite technology, and I was going to say, do you promise not to humiliate me when I answer the question?
Are you going to pull out your BlackBerry?
I was going to pull out a BlackBerry.
Yes!
It's a Toronto Waterloo corridor, but I mean,
that's correct.
Like it works. I mean, and I pull it out now, especially at a place like Web Summit, they go, what is that? I say, well, it's a BlackBerry, and they say, well, what is that? And I don't care. I'm proud of this. It works, and I love this keyboard. So people.
The keyboard is great. I miss my keyboard, but in tech now we're aiming for slightly higher than it works.
This is very hurtful.
Anyway, let's give the mayor a warm round of applause.
Thank you,
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Michelle.
That was awesome.